Hi, I just watched the Fantastic Four First Steps, and I have so much to say about this movie. The plot, the characters, the post-credit scene, the score, the CGI, so much to say. The return to form for Marvel, also something so new that I've never really seen in any of their previous films. The setup for Avengers DOOMSDAY, and so much more that I want to talk about in this movie. But there's also a problem, a really big problem that I couldn't help but notice over and over again in this movie. But also reminded me of other movies I've watched recently, very recently in some cases, most notably Superman. Yeah, I know, I'm talking about Superman again. But also another big box office hit that came out this month, Jurassic World Rebirth. We're going to get into all of that and more, but first, let's nerd out a little bit and talk about the Fantastic Four. I'm going to quickly do a non-spoiler recap and slight review before going more into depth into spoilers, and then after that we will discuss this big looming issue that I'm starting to notice with these movies that I really think needs to be addressed way sooner rather than later. So from this point on, there will be minor spoilers for Fantastic Four: The First Steps, but I will do another spoiler warning before I talk about anything too substantial, but you have been warned. I might bring up some stuff that you don't want to know before going into the movie. First and foremost, wow, I really do enjoy this movie a lot, way more than I expected to. Off the bat, I think the family dynamic between our main characters is flawless. Immediately, they have so much chemistry, and they all feel like they have such a rich history together that makes this world feel so lived in, but also makes our characters so much more likable from the very beginning of the movie. I think Pedro Pascal does an amazing job as Reed Richards. I was extremely hesitant to see him take on this role when he first got announced, but I really do think he was one of the highlights of the movie. I think he really embodies the character well, and I see Reed Richards in him all throughout this movie. Joseph Quinn actually caught me off guard too. While I still don't think he was the perfect pick for Johnny Storm, I do believe that he did a great job with what he was working with as well. All of his scenes really did give off that Firestorm charm, and his relationship with Ben, or the Thing, was definitely one of my favorite parts of this movie. Big highlight for me had to be Vanessa Kirby as Sue Storm, or, you know, the Invisible Woman. I do think she's a little too British though. Okay, maybe that was just me, but it really did take me out a few times. I do think her acting was great, spot on, and her accent was very convincing, but she just kind of looks British, or, you know, she at least doesn't look like someone from New York. It's a small nitpick, I know, but it really did bug me a few times in the movie. Speaking of New York though, I want to talk about quickly just the whole vibe of the movie, this like 60s utopian setting, this like post-future vintage vibe that they were going for. I think it's amazing. I loved it. I was really worried from the trailers that it might just kind of be played up as a gimmick, or, you know, even worse, completely ignored, but they really embraced it fully with this movie and used this setting to its fullest potential, in my opinion. I love how the city almost feels like a character at times. It reminds me a lot of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies and how alive they made New York feel. I think this movie does something very similar, but in a pretty different and unique way. I think all of the vintage, old-fashioned props are perfect and give this film such a flair that I wasn't expecting to love as much as I did, but I was obsessed with it. I was obsessed with the whole look of this movie all throughout. And that's another thing that I just have to mention, and that's just how beautiful the CGI is. This is some of the best, if not the best CGI that I've seen from the MCU, at least in a very long time. I mean, there are scenes in this movie that are insanely, jaw-droppingly beautiful, and that just isn't something I come to expect from the MCU anymore, honestly. Not even in a bad way. This CGI goes above and beyond superhero films multiple times. The CGI they used for the Thing is flawless. He feels so real and inside of the world that I was completely immersed the whole time. At no point did I think he looked off at all in the whole movie. Every single shot that they do in space is gorgeous and interstellar feeling at times, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, so obviously I loved that. I think there are moments with Mr. Fantastic or Reed Richards' powers specifically that don't look perfect and maybe look a little off, which is probably why his powers are used the least in the movie, which is a slight complaint I do have. I think for the most part, all of the powers of our characters are used amazingly for the Fantastic Four, but Reed feels underused in this movie, which is just becoming a common thing I expect from the Fantastic Four movies. I understand that the stretching powers have to just be hard to make look good and hard to do realistically, but honestly, I don't want realistic, and I honestly don't don't care if it looks a little off sometimes. It's supposed to look goofy. This is the Fantastic Four we're talking about. And if you can interpret Mole Man into this movie, I think you can make Mr. Fantastic like roll into a ball and roll down a hill or something. I don't know. I really want a little bit more creativity from them with his powers. It doesn't feel like too much to ask in my opinion. But then we also have our villains of the movie. The Silver Surfer was a character I was expecting to love going in, and I wasn't disappointed at all. She had some of the coolest action sequences in the whole movie, and her CGI actually looked fairly good for the most part. It does get a little touchy at times, but with a character that looks like this, I kind of give them a break, honestly. I don't expect it to look flawless, and at times it did, which really surprised me. And then, I mean, there's Galactus, which wow. I have a lot to say about Galactus, but I'm gonna save a lot of it for spoilers because yeah, he's imposing, extremely threatening and daunting the whole movie. It's amazing how from the minute he's introduced as a threat, he just looms over the rest of the movie. And it's amazing how incredible he looks. You know, another visual in this movie that is just jaw-droppingly gorgeous. And that is just anytime Galactus is on screen. I was glued to the edge of my seat the whole time looking at him. He's perfect and he doesn't feel goofy or out of place, which is something I think you can worry about with a character like Galactus, but I think he's used perfectly here. Plot-wise, I found the movie a little predictable and somewhat oddly paced. The story feels disjointed a bit and not exactly satisfactory, but also I do think a lot of the plot points, while simple and maybe exactly what you would expect from a Fantastic Four movie, are done really well here and much better than they have been done in the past. There's definitely something going on in that third act that really kills a lot of the momentum though that this movie had been building up. Like, it had beautifully built up a lot of momentum, and I still find a lot of enjoyment in that end action set piece, and I still had a really good time with it, but the runtime does just start to feel so noticeable towards the end of this movie for me, which is really disappointing given that this movie doesn't even reach the 2-hour mark. Somehow, I don't know, we will talk about that later. Overall, I think this movie is highly enjoyable. If you're a Fantastic Four fan, or even a casual like myself who's just kind of into the MCU, maybe you've read a little bit of Fantastic Four, I really don't think you'll walk out disappointed. This movie is a massive win for the MCU and just for superhero movies in general, and it feels incredibly high staked all throughout. There's great action, great characters, beautiful shots, great creative decisions throughout the whole movie, which is surprising for a Marvel movie, honestly, and so much more to look forward to inside of this movie. If you haven't given it the chance yet, I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun, and while you might not love it, I highly doubt you'll walk out disappointed, and you'll probably have a good time with it no matter what. I'm gonna give the Fantastic Four First Steps an 88%. I think it's a really solid movie. I have a lot of slight issues with it, but I think a lot of those issues could have been fixed, and I think this movie could have been saved in a lot of ways, which makes me feel a little bit more loose and laxed on it. It makes me want to give it a slightly higher score, so I might be a little high on it at the moment, so, you know, expect the score to change a little bit. I really enjoyed the movie, but let's talk about spoilers. So, big spoiler warning, everything from here on out will contain major spoilers for Fantastic Four The First Steps. If you haven't seen the movie yet, go watch the movie and then come back here and let me know what you thought of it. This movie has a really big pacing problem, a bad one. It is almost shocking to me how much momentum this movie successfully kills and how quickly it does it, and I have a lot of small theories on why that might be inside of the plot itself and also just with the movie, but I don't think that's where the major problem lies. No, I think a lot of the issues with this movie come down to the editing room. This movie was directed by Matt Shakman, who I'm not super familiar with, but I think he did a mostly incredible job with this film. But also, like, was he not in the editing room? I genuinely have to believe that he wasn't, at least at times for certain sequences. Almost every problem I have with this movie comes down to the choppy middle section and a lot of really rushed plot points that don't feel earned. Let's get my major complaints out of the way. I think the Silver Surfer was slightly underutilized in this one. I love her, and I think every scene she is in is great, but her sacrifice didn't do much for me personally, and I think her character might have been a little underutilized. I'd have to really hope we see her in a sequel. The Silver Surfer is one of my favorite parts of the Fantastic Four comics, not counting the Skrulls, who have already been wasted in the MCU, so at least give me the Silver Surfer, please. I feel like I've earned that at least. And then there's just Galactus as a whole. I do really believe that he was great, and I'm fine with the plot point of him deciding to go after Franklin, Sue and Richard's baby in this movie, but I don't love much of what happens with him from the point he gets onto Earth to the point he's defeated. I think visually it's stunning. Plot-wise and thematically though, not so much. Galactus was built up this whole movie to be so threatening and and there is so much dread happening to make him feel like this world-ending threat and this world-ending event almost, just for him to really not be. Like, he doesn't live up to any of that, really. No one gets hurt. No one is even in the way of getting hurt. He has one goal. He goes to New York, kind of steps on a couple buildings. Like, he really doesn't do a lot in this movie to feel threatening once he arrives on Earth. Like, he kind of goes out pretty easy, and the final fight doesn't build well or really at all. It just kind of happens on screen, which feels so weird to me because I really do think they were building up to a really well-earned ending, but then we just never got it. Galactus goes out extremely easily, and same with the Silver Surfer, both without great conclusions, and I want to see more of these characters. I think Galactus could be done much better. I think this is the best we've ever seen him, don't get me wrong, and I'm very happy with him, but I want more. I feel like Galactus deserves more. Same with the Silver Surfer. I've already said it, but I want more Silver Surfer, please. And then there's Sue's like death fake out scene, which, I mean, why do this? It got me slightly, kind of, maybe a little bit. Like, I felt emotional, and I love these characters, and they really built them up well, so I felt something, but it feels unearned. Like, obviously I knew she wasn't going to die here. It feels obvious, which is so odd to me because I really do like her character. Like, what went wrong here? I'm not exactly sure. I find the acting great though, and they sell it well. Like, I mean, it feels like watching a family member die, and it's heartbreaking and awful, but I was emotionally kind of already pulled out of the movie by this point, and this didn't help to bring me back in because I was sure she was going to be fine. And I think a big issue with that just comes down to too many cooks in the kitchen, to say, and by that I mean there is just very obvious something going on here, and with all the reports that have been coming out to back it up, it becomes very clear to me that this movie was butchered in the editing room. It just feels like it's so obvious, so there's so much more movie out there for this one, and you can really feel where parts of it have been chopped up and re-edited without much care for the original vision of the movie, almost Frankenstein in a weird way. And by the way, the fact that this movie is still as strong as it is shows just how good of a movie it really is. The fact that it does seem to have almost two different directors with two almost completely different visions, that's a really great testament to a good script, a good director, and an overall great movie. But I mean, come on, there are literally shots in the trailer that don't appear in this movie, and that sucks because they feel like they would add so much to what could have been easily one of the best MCU movies. I'm not kidding. It has all the ingredients to be a masterpiece, a great superhero film, and sadly just settles for being pretty good. And that's what brings me to all of the other movies that have been coming out this year. I think a lot of it comes down to test screenings. We heard about early test screenings for the Fantastic Four, and we know that they were probably reactionary to those audiences. I mean, we know that Gareth Edwards' Jurassic World Rebirth that came out earlier this year was cut up a lot in the editing room, and a lot of it was left out of the movie, and we would have to assume most of that was done to appease the test audiences. And the same goes with Superman. James Gunn has mentioned multiple times how many changes they would make to the movie after a test screening, and how many times they went back and forth on edits, and I really just don't like it. It's obvious that this movie suffered the same fate, most likely a reactionary decision from Kevin Feige or another higher up at the MCU after the shaky and inconsistent success of the MCU movies lately. They wanted to appease and satisfy those test audiences, but it never seems to go to plan, and these movies always seem to be worse off for it. All of these test audiences and the decisions they make after a test screening always seems to hurt the film, in my opinion. The edits made to Superman greatly hurt the pacing, and the edits made to this movie kill the momentum almost completely, and the edits made to Jurassic World just left it feeling empty, like something was missing. That'd be such a lesser complaint and so much less annoying if that something missing wasn't probably filmed and just cut out of the movie because of overreactionary editing. Trust your directors, trust your editors, and most importantly, trust your vision. I wish that this movie really got the chance to shine like it tries to, but there just wasn't enough faith. There wasn't enough trust. I believe this movie had one of the clearest and greatest visions for an MCU movie ever, and they just really let themselves down by shooting themselves in the foot and going after these overreactionary edits to try to fix a movie that, in my opinion, probably didn't need fixing. It just sucks. It really sucks. I hate to see it, and I really hate to see it happening as many times as it is, and as many times in a row as it's happened now. These three examples are just barely the tip of the iceberg, but they've all come out this month. And And with how many times this has happened now, it's becoming a real problem. We need to go back to trusting our directors and ignoring the test audiences, at least a little bit. Parts of what they say might be helpful and they might be good for making these films better, but in the end, it will never not be in everyone's best interest to just let our filmmakers make the movies. Let your directors direct their movie and don't come down and edit it behind their backs and change it to a vision that wasn't what they were doing when they were filming. Or I mean, if you're going to do a lot of editing, if you're going to try to save a movie in the editing room, at least let the director in on it. Let the director make those executive decisions. At least with Superman, they got lucky and they had James Gunn, who was the reactionary one, who also directed the movie. But I'm sure Shackman was pretty proud of this movie, as he should be, and I highly doubt he was the one making those final edits. But I guess we'll probably sadly never know. These MCU movies rarely, if ever, get director's cuts. I think this one, if any, deserves it. And I would love to one day see the full vision of this movie. Perhaps this was the full vision and it just didn't work out the way they wanted it to, but I really don't believe so. Like, do I think a director's cut of this movie would be perfect and fix all of my complaints? No, probably not. But I think it would be really nice to see a director get trust and be fully trusted, and it'd be nice to see directors get their fair shot for once. It rarely happens these days, and we see these directors get screwed over by the higher ups all the time. And while this movie isn't the worst example of it, I think it's a really big showing of the problem, because this movie got lucky. It's still an amazing movie, but a lot of movies don't get so lucky. There are some really great movies, I'm sure, that get destroyed in the editing room. One that comes to mind is Suicide Squad from 2016. David Ayer claims to have made a really good movie, and we'll sadly never know, because that movie was re-edited by a trailer house because of reactionary decisions from DC and Warner Brothers. It's sad to say, but it feels like reactionary editing is becoming a bit of a plague in these movies, and it has been for almost a decade now. I think it's time to get out of our own heads and really let these movies shine. But let me know, do you guys think I'm overreacting a little bit? Did you guys notice some of the issues that I'm noticing? And also just let me know what you guys thought of Fantastic Four in the comments below. Have you noticed this issue lately? Does it bother you? Does it not bother you? How do you really feel about it? Do you think we should be listening more to these test audiences, listening less to them? I'm genuinely curious to hear your guys' opinions, but for now, that's pretty much all I got, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.